So, what does it actually mean to change? I mean, really, truly change. It's a question that sits at the very heart of so many spiritual journeys, right? In this explainer, we're going to dig into that. We're going to look at three totally different perspectives on how real transformation happens. So, let's get right into it. You see the smudge of ash on someone's forehead, you hear about a 40-day promise, or maybe you just know someone's going through a really tough, private struggle. But where does the real change actually begin? Is it in the public stuff we can see, or is it something deeper, something harder? We often see the outside, but the real work? That's almost always hidden from view. So let's try to unpack what that process can actually look like. Okay, so to really get into these different paths, we kind of need a starting point, right? A common frame of reference. And for millions of people all over the world, that starting point is the season of Lent. It's going to provide the backdrop for our whole conversation today. So, what exactly is Lent? Well, at its core, it's this 40-day period that's all about spiritual preparation. The whole idea is that the practices of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, giving to others, are meant to draw believers closer to God before they celebrate Easter. Think of it as a time that's intentionally set aside for reflection and discipline. And the thing that kicks it all off, Ash Wednesday, well, it has a really long history. This wasn't something that just appeared overnight. It evolved over centuries. And it wasn't until around the 10th century that the act of receiving ashes became a widespread custom. And now, wow, today that simple mark on the forehead is this powerful global symbol of mortality and the need for repentance. All right, that brings us to our first big perspective, and it asked a really challenging question. Is focusing on just 40 days enough? This point of view calls for something way more constant, a lifelong discipleship. The entire argument for this perspective really hinges on this specific verse. And notice the word that's emphasized here, daily. The point being made is that this wasn't a call for some special seasonal program. It was a call for a consistent, everyday, day in and day out kind of commitment. That one word changes everything. And this chart just lays out the contrast so clearly, doesn't it? On one side, you have what's called seasonal religion, a 40-day program that's focused on outward customs. But on the other, you have lifelong discipleship, a 365 days surrender focused on a genuine inward change of heart. It's the difference between being a festival Christian and a daily cross carrier. And this gets us to the absolute bottom line of this perspective. Ritual without reality is empty. A symbol, like putting ashes on your head, only has meaning if it reflects a true internal change of heart. Otherwise, it's just an outward gesture with no real spiritual power behind it. But hold on, what if the goal isn't to replace tradition, but to go deeper with it? Our next perspective explores exactly that, how to examine our inner life in a way that gives these rituals real meaning. This is the key question this viewpoint tries to answer. If the big danger of traditions like Lent is that they can become superficial, just something you do, what's the fix? Well, the answer, this view suggests, is found in a deeper kind of self-reflection. So this approach introduces two different types of examination. The examen of conscience is probably the one you're more familiar with. It's about looking back at your actions and asking, where did I mess up? Where did I sin? But then there's this other layer, the examen of consciousness. And this asks a totally different question. Where was God present in my day? Where was I being prompted or called to act? See the difference? It's subtle, but it's huge. So how does this actually work in practice? Well, it's kind of like a three-step process. First, you review your day, but you're specifically looking for how God was moving. That's the consciousness part. Then, step two, you evaluate how you responded to those divine nudges. That's the conscience part. And finally, all of that leads to real repentance, where you can ask for forgiveness and get ready to start fresh tomorrow. It's a way of turning a simple ritual into something truly transformative. Our third and final perspective presents a very different, much more metaphorical view of change. This is the path of transformation that doesn't come through discipline or reflection, but through the struggle of being broken. This perspective is really articulated by Dr. Manikumar. He describes spiritual transformation as this divine process, one that often involves being reshaped in a way that can feel, well, painful and incredibly confusing. And this is the central metaphor. It's such a powerful image. To create something beautiful, a potter can't just work with hard, dry clay. They have to break it down, moisten it, and knead it into something new.
This view suggests that human transformation sometimes requires that same kind of necessary deconstruction.
And according to this teaching, that reshaping process often involves three distinct stages. It starts with confusion, just feeling completely lost. Then it moves into weakness, a sense of total powerlessness, whether that's physical, spiritual, or emotional. And finally, it often involves loneliness, a period where old supports fall away, forcing you to rely on God alone. This illustrates the purpose of that struggle so perfectly. A caterpillar doesn't just hang out in the cocoon. It has to fight its way out. That solitary effort is literally what builds the strength in its wings needed for flight. The struggle isn't a sign that something's wrong. It's an essential part of the transformation itself. So we've explored three very different approaches. You've got daily discipline, deeper reflection, and this idea of transformative struggle. At first glance, they seem totally opposed to each other. But is there a unifying thread? Let's find out.
Here's the common ground. All three of these paths, in their own way, point to the exact same destination. They all agree that true, lasting change isn't about the outward motions. It's an internal transformation of the heart. So, whether your path looks like daily consistency, or intentional reflection, or even a difficult struggle, the engine is the same, a sincere desire for authentic growth.
And that leaves us with one final question to consider. Looking at these different pathways and thinking about your own life, what does a genuine journey of change actually look like for you? It's a question that goes far beyond any 40-day season, and it's one that's definitely worth reflecting on long after this explainer is over.